C5 Insight is a Microsoft partner that plans, builds, and supports solutions in Dynamics 365, Teams, SharePoint, and the Power Platform. Contact us to modernize your business today. Let's get the show underway with our presenter, Senior Business Solutions Analyst, Malcolm McCauley. A couple things for you to know about Malcolm. He is a Microsoft MVP, and my favorite fun little fact, he's on a mission to visit every single Major League Baseball stadium. So go ahead and take it away, baseball guru.
Oh, well, guru, that's an overstatement. I'm glad you started it on time, because if you had started late, I feel like people would have confused the topic for today with the sentiment of like, man, it's about time she got started. So good thing you got started right on the dot and people didn't need to do that. So looking forward to presenting today. I'm going to steal sharing over and you should see this screen. And Allison, I'll just ask for your thumbs up or commentary that you're good. You see
Double
that?
thumbs up. We see it.
Beautiful. Excellent. So we are going to talk about the fascinating world about time, but not so much time as it is activity management within the context of Dynamics 365 CE. So sales, customer service, field service, project operations, all those great tools. And so this is quite frankly, and I know you're going to say, well, you're being paid to say that, but in my opinion, this is one of the most interesting elements of the entire application. There's so much to do with interacting. In fact, if you peel apart the term CRM, right, all these tools really make up the context of what a CRM system is. And if you go by definition, a CRM is customer relationship management. And so how do we manage our relationships? Well, it's about understanding and paying attention. It's about listening to the people we're interacting with. If you interact with somebody socially and you're not really paying attention, you don't listen to them, you don't understand what they're saying all the time, you always ask for reminders of who they are and what they do and what they're talking about, that's probably a person you're going to find frustrating to interact with. And if you take that logic and spin it into the context of working with customers in a professional environment, we don't want our customers to feel that way. In fact, we want them to feel like they are being listened to and understood, that we're taking what they're saying and we're connecting the dots so that we know how to best serve them. And so when you look at that, as much as this is a bit of a kind of a joke that maybe it's not the most interesting data after all, when you layer in how we should be interacting with our customers, it actually makes tremendous sense that really the center of the universe when it comes to customer relationship management is how you manage your activities and your interactions with them. So we're going to spend some time diving into a number of different components, really to hammer this home. And we're going to talk about why that is. I'm going to go into a little more detail. I also want to talk to you a little bit about how you can leverage the application to support you and really build a good, solid plan about how to interact with customers and interactions. So one of the things to call out here is that the activities component touches almost every element of Dynamics, right? So if you think of it in the sales context, which I'm going to do a lot today, so I'm going to be heavily kind of focused on the sales sentiment, but you could apply this to customer service, right? This idea of talking to the customer, understanding what we've said to them recently, understanding what we've said to other customers, dealing with those issues, that gets into that customer service and cases. If we do go back to the sales front, it's about interacting with the account from just a general account management, checking in, how are they doing, any major changes, are they opening up new locations, anything like that, all the way through the actual opportunities that we're pursuing with them. So you're trying to make sales and you want to track your interactions with them and you want to stay on top of those because you don't want that interest to fizzle out and them turn elsewhere and be fulfilled by another organization. You want to be the one that's selling to them. So when you look at it in that context, this idea of activities being the nucleus of all of this interaction is really quite logical, right? And Microsoft sees that, and that's why they have rolled out so many features that you see on screen to support organizations and users in their pursuit of positive customer interaction, right, is one way you could put it. So there's lots of tools here. We are not going to have time to go through all these. We are definitely going to touch on some of them today as we talk about the plan and then how you can take that plan around effective interaction with your customers and layer it into and have the application support you through that journey, whether it's through automated means or just general sort of practice as a user of how to manage those activities. So we're going to touch on all that. A little bit about me. I know Allison already gave me a great introduction. So we are, as a family, on a mission to see all the ballparks. This is our one in Toronto. I'm not too far from Toronto, Ontario, in Canada. So we have spent plenty of time at this ballpark in Toronto, and pleased to say they've made some significant renovations. It looks very different actually than what you're seeing now. But we are on a mission. In fact, this coming summer, the plan right now is we're looking at 7 games in 5 cities. So we've got a lot to deal with this summer. It's going to be a great road trip if we can make it work, but that's kind of part of what we pursue. And this is who I pursue it with. So these are my family, my beautiful wife, Sarah, and our 2 children, the oldest of which just got his learner's permit on his birthday on Monday. So that I had full head of hair, and then he got his license and it all went away. I'm just kidding, obviously. I think some of you may have met me. I don't have hair and haven't had hair for a long time. So those are my children. We spend a lot of time golfing. That picture in the bottom with me and a guitar, that's for show only. I can make a noise, but it's really not a very good one. So it's really just a show. So here's where we're going to go through the day today. So we're really going to spend the first part of our day on the why activity management. I've already kind of started down that path for you, but I want to give you a little bit more detail. And then I want to go into the plan. And when we get into the plan, we're going to spend a little more time there, really hammering out the key components of, from our position here at C5, how we should be managing our activities. It's how we aspire to do it as an organization ourselves, and we believe it's a really good solid blueprint for you as an organization. And so we want to share that with you today, talk you through that, how that plan works, and how it's all kind of connected and cyclical. And then we want to talk about the CRM setup. And a slight caveat there, I'm not going to go into great level of detail. I won't be giving you instructional detail. Click here, then do this, then do this. But we have equipped the deck that you're going to see today with a greater level of detail than I'm going to share with you. And if you would like that, please drop your email. I know you've already registered, but if you're interested in the output of this and the deck that will give you a little bit more on the here's how to set those things up, please drop your email in the chat and we will be sure to follow up with you and share that information. So we are going to go into some detail on the setup, but I'm going to more so talk about the features that you could explore setting up as opposed to the granular here's how to set them up. And then we'll wrap up, and there's a short video that we will leave for you to watch. Again, if you get the deck, it's a good little one about time management, but I'll talk through the logic of what the video covers, and then you can watch the video as we get there. So without further ado, let's dive into why activity management. And I know that, again, I've already started to set context around this. When we do this live and in person, we often pose this question. And so when we pose the question, the answer is generally a resounding yes. We almost always see all hands go up. Yeah, of course, we have multiple record types to follow up with. And of course, we interact with our customers on a frequent basis and sometimes multiple times a day. And understanding what those interactions are and have been really can become a challenge, and it in fact can become what we'd call like a vicious cycle at times. And here's what I mean by that. Most organizations get started and say, hey, we're going to be on top of everything, right? So at our inception, we're a brand new company, or maybe we're just doing a refresh on our organization, and we're going to be like, hey, our resolution for 2024 is we're going to be way better. We're going to be proactive on all things, everything, right? We're going to be proactive about setting our goals, and we're going to be proactive about our projects and our plans and our work and our dealings with our customers. And that's great. And we can stick to that for a period of time. But then this awful thing happens, and it's not really that awful. It's actually great. We're successful. But as we become successful, we become increasingly busy. And as we become increasingly busy, we get into this phase of being very, very reactive. And it's reactive because what we're doing is we're answering the phones, we're answering the emails, we're jumping from meeting to meeting as we go through our days. And many of you probably will agree that there are days where you feel like you could probably wear a firefighter's hat to your desk because you literally come in the morning and you do nothing but put out fires at the organization all day long. And that is wholly reactive. And so what we want to do is give you some methodology today to try and pull the reins back a little bit on that and at least, get to be 50% proactive and 50 reactive. There's always going to be an element of reactiveness, and we'll talk about that. But really trying to give you the tools to equip you to become more proactive than reactive. And it's really not that complicated, but it can be complicated and challenging to implement, and we'll talk about why. One of the reasons why this is so important is that data is critically important, right? That's not a new concept. Data has always been important, but in this day and age, particularly with the advancements in artificial intelligence and machine learning and how these tools can support you, they are phenomenal. If you're a nerd like me and you follow the AI, forums and the things that are out there, there's a tremendous number of things, a staggering, frankly, staggering number of features and functions that are coming out almost daily that help leverage AI and help you be more. And if we attach that to Microsoft's methodology, their entire MO, their entire vision and mission is to uh, empower organizations and individuals to achieve more. And they're doing that by layering in AI to help learn from the trends. And the reason I stress that is because data is the core of that AI, right? If it has bad data to work with, it's going to give bad recommendations. If you give it clean, good, proactive data, it's going to give you much better insights. And so you're seeing on screen a couple of the examples, but without the proper data sets behind the scenes, it can't do the things you're doing here. It can't capture notes automatically. It can't identify whether your relationship's good or bad because it doesn't have good data to base it on. So it could make some errors in that judgment. It can't give you accurate pipeline analysis if you don't give it the information. And it can't then give you proactive steps and supportive steps to move forward to pursue those sales deals and whatnot if it doesn't have good data. So that's the critical kind of undertone and thread through everything you're going to hear today. It really is about the data. Right? So as much as we talk about this being about time, we're really taking it a layer deeper and translating that time into the data that you give the system to identify how you've managed those interactions and how you've managed that time. So that's a bit about why, and I think it's hopefully pretty clear. If you take that for a minute and think about your organization, I have every confidence that you can probably connect some dots there and be like, yeah, I get it. Yeah, we definitely put out fires every day, and it would be great if we could be more proactive. So let's talk about how you could maybe do that. And I have good news and bad news. The good news is it is quite easy. The bad news is, sorry, let me rephrase that. The good news is that it's simple. The bad news is simple doesn't mean easy. And so what we're going to lay out for you over the course of the next handful of slides is how you can follow a sort of a fairly consistent set methodology and work it logically and linearly through, I guess it's not linear, it's more like a cycle, but we'll follow that process step by step, and it actually will feed itself in a sense. And so again, the good news here, it is fairly simple to do. The challenge is taking time to do it, and we'll address those as we go through each bucket. So let's start with the end first, right? So the goal here is we want people not to just track what they've done, but we want people to set the path forward for what needs to be done in the future. And that requires some proactive thinking, right? You're going to see that hear that term a lot today. It's going to require proactive thinking. And the first thing we're going to do is think about scheduling our activities, right? So let's go to the very beginning of a interaction with a customer as an example and say, hey, we've got this potential new customer and I want to foster them toward purchase of this thing. And to do that, the very first thing I need to do is I want to connect with them. So I need to schedule something with them. So we're going to schedule something that gives them, some opportunity to talk to you. And so we go ahead and schedule that. And we need to prepare for that meeting, right? So it's one thing to put it on the calendar. It's another thing to actually jump into that interaction and engage in that interaction. And it's really critically important that we do prepare. So sometimes we see people say, well, I prepared by putting it on the agenda. Or putting it on the calendar. That's great. But go a step further. Give yourself an agenda. What are the key points? And this could be fairly prescribed, right? If it's a brand new customer, perhaps there's things you want to talk about. If it's an existing customer, perhaps there's elements of data that you already know about them that you want to track. A really quick example would be something like a customer who maybe recently told you in your last interaction that they had a move. They bought a new house and they had a move coming up in the month after your last interaction. And here you are, fast forward 3 months later, you know that they've just moved. Ask them about it. It's part of your preparation, right? What is it that I need to think about with that customer? And again, in the context of customer relationship management, who doesn't love to jump on a phone call and have somebody ask them something about their own life? We're humans. We love talking about ourselves. That's just the way we roll. And it's really flattering to us when somebody has paid attention to us and knows enough about us to say, hey, I remember you were moving and you bought a new house. Moving can be so stressful. How'd it go for you guys? Everything, are you guys settled in? That simple act of asking that question could pay significant benefits in the relationship that you build with that customer. But if you don't prepare to remember to ask that question, then you lose the opportunity to have that very quick, perhaps under a minute, 2 minute interaction with them that could really help solidify your actual relationship with that person. So preparing is really important. And it's not just about the social tidbits, that's a big part of it, but also what is it that you're trying to talk about? What are you selling? Why are you selling it to them? What are their needs and interests? What did you learn from them when you listened during your previous interactions that you can leverage in your interaction? Plan that out, right? Give yourself an agenda of things to talk about with that customer to move the conversation forward. And so we've got schedule, we've got prepare, then there's the actual interaction and executing that meeting, right? So it rolls around and you jump on the call and you have your nice social nicety conversation with them, and that's great. But now you're in this real time interaction and dialogue with them. And this is where we're on our feet the most. This is the part where things could take a turn that we didn't expect, right? There could be elements of conversation that they layer in that you didn't know about. There could be challenges that they lay out for you in terms of their inability to purchase the thing you're trying to get them to, that you need to be able to dance with, if you will, right? And so having that interaction, that really falls on being well prepared. If you're well prepared for those interactions, then you're going to feel very confident. If you feel underprepared, then you're probably going to do a lot of the uhs and the ums and the delays and the things that I think are going to impact your ability to build a solid relationship, because they're not going to feel super confident. They're going to feel like you're perhaps unprepared for that interaction, which would not be good. While slash during slash after that interaction is the time at which we need to track. And this perhaps arguably is one of the most important aspects of this entire interaction, because it's not just about documenting what took place, but it's about scheduling that follow-up. That's why it's in bold at the bottom of that purple box you see there. Scheduling that follow-up means that we are scheduling the next thing to do. And as you can see, we're now in this circular square. Is it still a circle if it's a square? I don't know if that's circular if it's a square. I don't think so, but it's a cyclical style of interaction that's happening here. And so it's really important that that scheduling piece happens. And we're going to break each one of these into individual components, and we're going to talk about how you can leverage the technology to do that. But if you take anything away from this meeting at all and this webinar, it's that this method can really yield a lot of benefit, even if done manually. Schedule it, prepare it, have the interaction, and then track and schedule so that the loop continues, right? It's also important, really important to call out that 80% of the time of this whole process is probably in this red bucket in the lower right. That interaction, that's the most critical part, is the interaction. But again, this is about giving yourself the opportunity to have the interaction, schedule, preparing for it so you're prepared to have the right kind of conversation and an ability to I was going to say dodge and dance, but I guess that in some cases is what it is, but you're interacting with them. Right? But to do that, you prepare, you have the interaction, and then you track that interaction so that you're ready for the next one. So a lot of time in that bottom one, and that really is, a skill set that people just have and can hone over time, is how do I interact in those calls over time? So the good news is we can take that from that vicious cycle, that it can feel like a vicious cycle because it's this thing that just keeps going, to this thing that we want to keep going because it's actually giving us our best foot forward. It's equipping us and giving us time to listen to the customer, to understand their needs, to connect the dots between what they need and what we can provide, and to know that we're giving them the right solutions and an ongoing evolution of that as well, right? That scheduling so that we can listen again, better understand, reconnect, and know again even better how it is we can support them moving forward. So hopefully that gives you some idea of kind of the plan, right? And what we're going to do is take those four buckets, the schedule, prepare, the execute, and the follow-up piece. We're going to take each of those and give you detail on how you can configure your CRM system to support you in each of those areas. Because there's a variety of tools that you have at your fingertips that can help bring that. But again, if you take anything away from this, it's taking this schedule and saying, okay, how do we implement this even in a manual format? But but manual is great and that's fine. But again, there's tools at your fingertips that you can leverage. So let's talk a little bit about how you can adapt the tool to do the things you need it to do. We're going to take each one of these in order. And this is the point at which I'm not necessarily going to give you exactly how to build each of them, but I'm going to touch on select features for each one of these buckets that you could look at using and configure in a way to help you. We'll give you some tidbits on how to do that and kind of time dependent, but as it stands right now, we're going to cover all these four areas and talk about each one. So the objectives, first and foremost, when it comes to schedule, in an ideal circumstance, 100% of your work is coming from this and coming from this idea of a list of things that need to be done. So again, I said earlier, I'm going to sort of lean heavily on the sales aspect. So in the sales world, you have a lot of interactions. In fact, the vast majority of your job is interacting with people and trying to close the deal, right? So in the context of a salesperson, ideally we have all of our interactions that need to happen here. Now it says 100% of daily work. I'm gonna argue that you could probably say that that's 98% because there's unsolicited things that are going to come up that you couldn't possibly schedule and plan for, right? There's a customer who's going to have a question that you wasn't even on your radar, you didn't know was going to come up that could reach out. But the point here is the absolute maximum number of items and amount of work that you can possibly schedule should be scheduled and put into your CRM system. And then you want to clean that up and maintain it. And by virtue of following this process, you actually will be enacting this idea of cleaning, keeping the list short and manageable and succinct so that you know exactly what you're touching on, right? So perhaps to start, it's looking at the beginning of every week, I'm going to go in and make sure I have a schedule for the entire week laid out in front of me of all the interactions with all the customers that I know that I should be reaching out with, right? Start simple, right? What do they say? Keep it simple, silly, we'll say. And so let's keep it simple. Let's just say I've got these deals on the horizon and I need to have these interactions with those customers to move those deals forward. So let's get that list into the system. Well, how do we do that? There's a variety of ways. We're going to touch on a couple of them. So there's ways that you can get those activities. Of course, manual, right? You could just input them. You could sit down on your Monday morning, or maybe you do it at the end of the week before, so Friday afternoon, and you're literally saying, create a phone call due next Wednesday with this customer, and here's what I want to talk about. You could do that. There are ways to automate that. So we'll talk about workflow-driven tools, so automation behind the scenes. We're also going to spend a fair amount of time looking at options around neglected items. And we'll spend more time on that because it's a really important one, right? Let's be realists here. We understand that you will, just by virtue of being busy, you're going to get into that firefighting phase of work. And again, I talked about pulling the reins back a little bit. How can we give you control to be able to say, I'm going to push pause on the reactive part of my world, and I'm going to look at the things that I really should be following up on that aren't just pinging me in my inbox or in my Teams or on my cell phone. They're things I know I've neglected and I need to follow up on because those kinds of fires are really important too, and we need to deal with them. There's also follow-ups on previous activities, and we'll talk through that a little bit. And then we're going to spend some time talking about how to manage the schedule, right? So regular, usually weekly Ideally, this is a daily thing that you could do that. And that's perhaps a tall order, right? The reality is we often have days that are stacked with call after call after call, and making sure that we have time to reflect on those calls, schedule the next action, track the things that we did, and so on, can be really challenging. The important part here is that you take time intentionally to do that, whatever works for you, right? And so don't try not to be too overzealous and say, I'm going to do this every day for the last hour of my day. Is it realistic that you can do that? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe the goal is rather that we're going to spend a half an hour a day, whether that's the beginning of the day for yesterday's afternoon's calls or at the end of today for today's calls. The idea is we're building in time in some way, shape, or form to do the things we need to do here. So these are the two that we want to focus on the most. So I'm going to go through how the application could do this for you. Again, not going into granular level detail, but we want to talk about some of the capabilities that exist.
Struggling to leverage Microsoft Enterprise solutions? At C5 Insight, we understand the intersection between technology, business, and people. Contact us to learn more.
So we'll talk about this is really about getting like the how, right? How do we get things on our schedule? And so let's dive into this idea of workflow or automated. And it could be that you connect them with a sequence. It's a great feature that's available now. You can connect an account with a sequence or a record with a sequence, and that sequence is a tailor-built sequence of activities that need to happen. And you can control them and essentially design them as you need to, so that if you have let's say, an account management sequence that needs to fire, that might look very different than your opportunity sequence that's firing for managing an opportunity through the sales phase. So you want to kind of build those out based on your needs. You can also leverage looking at workflows in Power Automate, right? So you could build tools that are set to trigger manually, so that you say, oh, I need to fire the such and such process, and that's going to build me this sequence of activities. Or it could be based on field level data, right? So you could make a toggle in a field or change a certain set of data that's going to trigger this job to create the thing, because it's kind of leaning on what it knows of you, and you've given it this piece of information that says, when you see this value switch from A to B, we now know we need these activities to be created, right? So you have that capability. You'll notice in gray at the bottom of the options set there, Dynamics 365 Customer Insights Journeys, formerly known as marketing. So that's a tool that you definitely could use. If you're not using that tool today, then you may want to look into its capabilities. It's a very powerful tool, and continues to get even more powerful as Microsoft continues to invest. But it is a tool that we're not going to really touch on today, but something that if you're using it as an organization, there are tools available in there where you can trigger actions based on what they do, right? Customer journey. So somebody visited this web page, I need to put some activities in my calendar to follow up with them, because if they went to the web page, they're probably interested. Right? So some examples like that. So let's talk for a minute about the sales accelerator. And I just want to call out, within the premium, you kind of get the full capability here. They have made some minor changes, and you do actually have limited capabilities on sequencing and things like that in the Sales Enterprise version now as well. And so that's worth calling out, because I don't want you to write it off as, well, we don't have Sales Premium, so we can't do this. You can do it. They limit the number and the volume that you can do a little bit on the Sales Enterprise, but depending on your organizational size, it could still be plenty. And so what you're seeing on the right is this idea of a sequence, right? A sequence is quite literally building this sequence of events that needs to unfold. So we're looking at, hey, this thing happened, right? We created a lead, and that lead, we're going to say, let's wait 5 days, and then we're going to send a follow-up email. And then we're going to automate the send, or we're going to just draft the email and you can send it when you're ready. And then we're going to wait 5 more days or 3 days. Or maybe you don't wait anything. Maybe you also create a task that is to research some information. Maybe you want to look them up on LinkedIn and you want to do some research about them, and there's specific components of information you're looking for. Right? The point here is it can be whatever you need it to be. So you can build a sequence to map your step, and there's great branching logic that you can do if and then, right? So if if I did LinkedIn research and I changed the field on the lead record from, again, I'll use the generic A to B, that means we're going to branch to the right. If I change it from A to C, we're going to branch to the left. And those right and left branches could include totally different sets of activities. One of them could be one or two things, and then you're done. This other one could transpire into this huge list of things that need to happen based on data that you're learning. The point here is you have lots of capability to build the process that you need to build. Big part of that is building out the plan, right? So start with pen and paper, as painful as perhaps that may be in this day and age, and start to build out a flow chart. What is the process that needs to unfold? What are the touch points that we want to make sure we're hitting with a customer? And what do we need to do? And what information, what research, what data, what tasks, what phone calls need to happen? Sketch all that out and then go in and start to build out your sequence to mirror that process. We also want to talk about Power Automate. And so such a the opportunities are virtually endless here, right? You can be as simple as you want. I add a lead and it create a task to do research. That's it, right? That could be it. You could take that to an infinitely more complex scenario where you could have all kinds of different data points that you're waiting on, much like the sequences example I just shared. But the idea being that you know, based on your interactions with the record, or even it's when you do a certain action. So again, we'll say create a lead, that Power Automate flow fires and creates all of these things for you, showing up in the timeline, and they're all in front of you, and you just kind of go through step by step, setting all your due dates accordingly, and so on. So again, lots of capability there. And you see an example. I'm not going to necessarily read through it on screen, but you see an example. That's one of quite literally trillions of examples, if not to infinity and beyond, of examples of things you could do, right? Because it really depends on your process. The core thread to all of this, plan, right? Build a plan. What is it that you're trying to achieve? And how do you need to achieve it? What are the activities and interactions with that customer that you want to or need to do to achieve what you're trying to do with that customer? Build that plan first, and then you can look at, okay, here's how we're going to execute that. I mentioned we're going to spend a lot of time on neglected monitoring. So we definitely will. The next probably 6 or so slides touch on the neglected monitoring, and I want to touch on a few different features and functions. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I want to just highlight some of the key features, right? So Sales Insights as a suite of functions and features that you have access to. So for example, the assistant, if you're familiar with Dynamics 365 sales, the assistant is the tool that's going to do what you see on the left-hand side here. It's going to say things like, hey, this opportunity is closing soon, right? And that's its way of prompting, hey, you probably have something to do, right? It's going to close soon. In order to close it, you have to get the customer to do the thing, to sign the thing, to give you the thumbs up to whatever it is. You probably need to give it some attention. And there are dozens of cards that you can pick from, like these assistant notifications. In fact, probably even more than dozens at this point. They continue to add more, and you can configure some on your own. They're really helpful to kind of factor in, and again, this is really leaning on AI, so really factor in, hey, in this scenario, surface this card so that I don't forget to do this thing, right? In the middle, you can see this idea of a card that says, hey, we've got, there's no activity on this opportunity. And what do you want us to tell you about that? And days, you notice at the bottom, days before notifying me that there's no activity on the opportunity, that you can set that. That's a changeable date, a number rather, so that you can say, okay, you know what, we want to be really sensitive that we only want 15 days. If there's no interaction on an opportunity for 15 days, I want the salesperson to be like focused on it, right? And looking at it and reminded that that thing is there and they need to do something on that. Maybe your sales pipeline or close time is a lot longer than that, and you want to change it to 90 days. That's fine. But the point is, you have creative control over what that's gonna do. The assistant cards are great. They have tremendous features. One of the slight limitations is, while you have some configurable components, they're in some scenarios seem almost not quite configurable enough. So they give you some capability, we have every confidence that that's going to continue to evolve and change over time. It's just a matter of what's getting built into the tool. But at the very least, I would look into what the cards that are there are. You can turn them on, turn them off, and kind of tailor them to, as best you can, to meet the needs of your organization. Maybe it's not a perfect fit just yet, but at least could get you in the right ballpark. For me, the one in the middle is probably one of the most important ones, right? Hey, there's an opportunity and we've not had an interaction on it, and that's not good. We don't want that. So let's make sure that people at minimum are reminded, hey, you've got this thing and you haven't really been doing anything about it. So do something about it. On the right-hand side, one of the other features is the email engagement tool. A great functionality, right, that you can turn on and say, hey, when I send this email to the customer, monitor it, let me know when they've opened it. And you can see there's the beginning of a rule here that says, set a reminder to follow up on this email. And the condition is, if I don't receive a reply by such and such a date, then go ahead and create a reminder. And here's the text for that reminder. Hey, check the status of this proposal sent on this date. I mean, so that's a really handy feature. If they do respond, that rule won't fire. You're not going to get that reminder. But if they don't respond, then you will be notified, and it's going to force you to follow up on that situation so that you know it. And again, this is getting it out of the context of the human having to remember everything and write everything down, and leveraging the technology for what it's there for, to automate these reminders and say, hey, I'm gonna support you in your day-to-day by reminding you of the things that you need to pay attention to. Hey, lots of great capability there. Sales Premium is an extension to that, right? So the Sales Premium license is an additional license that gives you added capabilities. You can see a number of the functions available here: notes analysis, talking points, who knows whom, right? That's a neat one. Who knows whom, if you can say it properly. It's a really neat one that's going to help me understand who in my organization might be a good person to connect with about this customer. That's a great tool, right? Because we may have the scenario where we have multiple people working with our customers, and there might be somebody who has interacted a great deal, and the system's actually going to look at that, and it's going to say, wow, Sally has had multiple emails and instances of interaction with this customer. They would be a really strong person for you to talk to. If you look back in the deck to the slide we showed earlier, who knows whom was on the right, and it gives you a rating scale. The gentleman at the top was in full green, somebody else was in like yellow, and somebody else was red with only 2 bars at the bottom. It's actually rating for me who are the best people in my organization to talk to about this customer. One thing I want to call out, and it actually may apply to some other features, but conversational intelligence is a function that's actually been layered in some capacity into the sales enterprise function. So much like the example I shared before, you have limited capability, they've layered that. And this is an ongoing evolution. We've noticed that Microsoft's doing this with a lot of things. Things are moving between tiers a little bit. So conversational intelligence at one point in time was premium, and there's some extra features you can get there, but they've taken some of the core of it and layered it into the sales enterprise. So if you're using sales enterprise, I would not write any of these off. I would look in, because it is quite literally changing. I was going to say day to day. I don't know that it's quite that frequent, but week to week, in terms of things that are available, not just the features, but whether they're available in which tier of licensing. And it changes so fast that probably by the conclusion of this webinar, there are components here that may have shifted one way or the other, or all new features, completely new features. Copilot is something, if you haven't heard about it, you must live under a rock, because it is everywhere in these applications. And so there's a lot of work going on there, helping in this regard, surfacing information, helping you create information to send to your customer. So I'm going to skip through the next few slides. I know we talked a little bit. I said that we were spend a little bit of time on the dynamic, but I want to make sure we touch on the other features. So what you're seeing over the course of these slides, I'm going to pass over, are some details on here's how you could go ahead and set up some of this stuff, having some calculated roll-up fields to do some calculations, make sure that you have reminders, create some views to give you the right information, make sure that you use the insights that are available to you. So lots of capabilities. I know I flew past those, but you can look back on the recording, or as I mentioned, drop your email in the chat and we'll be happy to send the deck and you can kind of examine those slides in a little more detail. They, again, don't give you the click by click how to, but they do give you details and insight on what you might want to consider and how you might build that. And of course, if you have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to C5 Insight. We'd be happy to chat. So going back to the matrix that we talked about before, right? We had the schedule, the prepare, execute, and follow up. So we're now into that prepare phase. And I want to just touch on some of the things you want to do to prepare. Right. So you've got your meetings on the calendar, you've got calls coming up with customers, and you're now saying, okay, I come into my desk, 8 o'clock in the morning, and I'm getting ready for my day, and I've got these 4 calls, and I want to prepare for each one of them so that when I join the call, I'm in the know, I feel well put together, the customer perceives me as well put together, and I'm building a strong relationship. So we have that previewing that day schedule, right? Whether it's the evening before, maybe it's the morning before, move items that maybe need to be moved, right? Maybe there's something that you have to reschedule because the customers reach out, said, I've got a sick child today and I can't do the meeting. Let's push it. So you can move things, push other components as you need to. Capture some pre-notes. I gave this example earlier, so I won't hash on this too hard, but the idea was like, hey, what is it that I want to talk to them about, right? What information do I know about this person that I can factor into the conversation? Even just those initial, hey, how are you doing conversations. Maybe you don't have anything to talk about. What's the go-to? The weather, right? Hey, how's the weather where you are? It's been snowing like crazy here. I'm in Canada. That's a normal thing for us at this time of the year. And then look at intuitive activity sorting, right? So at sorting through your activities and which ones have to come up. Again, rescheduling ones that you can't maybe accommodate after all. Just looking at your schedule and making sure that you can actually handle all the things on your agenda for the day. So how might you do that? The sales accelerator is wildly helpful for this. So it gives you this pane you can see where the number 1 is on the screen. There's a number 1, my work list. It gives you this great breakdown of all the records that make up the detail of my day, the activities of my day. And what you can see is it's actually going to open the record. So I can click on any one of those, and in the right-hand pane, it's actually opening the record that that activity pertains to. And I can make edits to that record and change. I can reference data on there. I can look at what's up next, which is the activity that I would see in my feed. That, as well as what's called the task view or the focused view, give you the ability to open up your accounts and look at all the different accounts in your list. It gives you a slightly different way of looking at the information. Really, really functional and handy when it comes to preparing for your interactions, right? Oh, I've got a call about this company. Maybe it's even just an internal call. I've got a call about that company. Let me pull up that record and look at the data and prepare myself for that discussion. The activity sorting, this is a bit of a pain point. I'm conscious of time. I know we're down to about 15 minutes, so I'm gonna cover this lightly. It's one of the key components is that, or factors, I guess, is that there are a ton of dates on our activity records in Dynamics, right? If you open up the activity record and open up the different kinds, there's due dates, there's completed on, modified on, what's the actual close date. There's all of these dates that get factored in, and it's hard to understand which ones are really relevant for sorting, and that actually changes based on the activity type. So there's the concept of the activity pointer, which is like the umbrella of all activities. And then you've got this idea of the appointment and email and task and phone call. These are all unique activity records. They have their own table, and the data could be sorted slightly differently. The key takeaway here is just paying attention to that. What are the sort dates? Understand what they are. Generally speaking, it's the modified date for sorting things in the timeline. But you also may want it sorted a different way, and you need access to that field, or you need the ability to see that information in a view to be able to sort on it. You can also filter on, things that are coming up in the next X and things like that. So understanding all of the dates that are relevant and replicating that chart we just gave you with what are the date fields that matter to you, right? So when we're talking about a phone call, the due date is critically important. The modified on maybe isn't that important to you, but the actual close date is, because that's the date it was actually completed and closed. So just understanding what things matter to you. There's a couple of potential solutions that we can give you with respect to this idea of the sorting activities being a challenge. And so you can see on screen, we have a couple of bullet points here. I'm not going to go into tremendous detail, but you may want to require the due date on fields. Now, some cons you can see called out there. The most important one is it means that they have to be able to fill that in. Now, a due date seems like a field that you probably could, but sometimes you might just be creating a record literally on the fly, saying, I know I have to make a phone call with them. Just put the phone call in against a record and I'll look at it up later. If you make the due date required, they're going to have to fill in the required field of due date. That could be problematic. It's probably not as challenging as it sounds, but it could be a frustration for users. So just something to be mindful of. You could then leverage Power Automate to kind of write to fields that you build for the sole purpose of sorting information, right? So you could perhaps take the due date. You can see the example here, the due date field, and maybe take the information that they put there and write it to a field that you can leverage to sort. That way, if they change that information, you have the original date, or you could equip that flow to overwrite that information. But the idea is again, identifying what it is you need as an organization to be able to filter and sort your activities, and giving yourself the data you need. I talked earlier about data being critically important, and this is what we're talking about. What is the information about these activities that you need to be able to sort, right, the activity, or to be able to have insight into when was that activity done, was it done on time, who completed it, all those elements of information. So being mindful and tripping myself a little bit up, I catch myself doing that because I'm seeing the time and I want to make sure we have time to cover the last few slides here. So we scheduled, we prepared, we're in the execution stage. This is, as we said, the point at which you're thinking on your toes the most, right? You're in the dialogue. Hopefully you've prepared well. You had great opening conversation. You're now in the back and forth about the deal. You're discussing the elements and components. You want to be able to track that without having to make it seem like you're taking a lot of notes. Now, there's tools that you can leverage for that, right? The Copilot is doing a lot of work with that. If you look at things like the conversational intelligence, you can record the call. You also have access to the recording and transcript so that you can just read the transcript. The benefit to something like a conversational intelligence note taking is the intelligence part of that is actually that it's going to tease out the to-dos and action items. So if you're having a call and conversational intelligence is monitoring that, and you say things like, I'll put a call on the calendar for next week, it's going to tease that out, and it's going to ask you at the close of that call, hey, you said you wanted to schedule a phone call. Would you like me to schedule that? Or should I create a task for you? It's going to pull out those to-dos. And that's artificial intelligence at work for you, right? That's the tool literally working to support you. It's actually giving you the reminders and the next steps that you need. Without it, it's still doable, but it's all about making sure you have good notes. So one effective practice we see a lot, booking, I talked earlier about stacking phone calls back to back. I know how hard it is to not do that, but if you can avoid doing that, or at least bake in 5 minutes of time at the close of each call to make sure that you can reflect on that call and take the notes while it's fresh, that's ideal state. Right? Ideal state is being able to do it and have artificial intelligence do it for you. Secondary ideal state, I would say, is having time to reflect virtually immediately on that call. Failing that, at least have a schedule, right? So standardize some time in your day, whether it's at the close of your day, to make the notes you need to, and make sure that you put the information in after. This kind of gets into the whole concept of tracking, which we're going to talk about in a minute. But the idea is, while you're in the call, what can you do to capture the key takeaways from that? Also remembering that there's this element of listen, understand, connect, and know ever present in your execution capability. So as you're talking to them, you're constantly listening, trying to understand, right? You're paraphrasing, you're parroting what you're hearing so that they confirm that you're understanding what you think you're understanding, and then connecting the dots with how you can serve them and understanding what to do with that information next so that you can continue to listen and understand on all your interactions. So just keep that in mind, right? That whole concept of listen, understand, connect, and know, or luck, is something that we take very seriously here. It's literally the connective tissue of our organization. It's how we operate in internal meetings, in our recruitments, it's in our external engagements, it's in our sales calls, it's in everything we do. This concept of listen, understand, connect, and know. So again, some examples of things you could be leveraging and using. I know Allison's probably looking at the time thinking he better wrap up soon. I'm on it, so we'll give you the time to wrap up. So you've got the sales accelerator. You have the capabilities. I've already touched on some of them. You've got this notion of having everything you need to do. The ideal state, right? In my opinion, from my perspective, I love to have a single place that I can go to see everything that I need to be working on. What I don't want is I don't want to have to go to my email and look at my tasks there for one thing. Go to CRM and see some tasks over there. Go to another application to see some to-do items for a different project. That to me is very jumbled and disjointed and very frustrating. If I can have everything funneled into one place so I know exactly what I need to be working on, when I need to work on it, and with whom, then I'm in a much better position to be productive as I go. So as you can see on this screen, there's a handful of side notes around. I just want to touch on the fact that the idea here, again, I've said this a couple times, just have a plan in place of what is the information you need, configure your forms to give you the data you need, perhaps use things like the quick view forms you see on the right-hand side, right? So when I pick the account record, give me this data about the account record, or give me the data about the opportunity record so that I don't have to navigate away and see it. I just see I have a task, it's related to this opportunity, and here's the particulars of that opportunity. So that's saving me time, right? That's keeping me more focused on the task literally at hand as I flesh through what I need to do. And if it's a phone call, same concept, it's keeping me focused on the phone call record while giving me access to the information that's important. That could be about the opportunity, the account, the person I'm interacting with, whatever the case may be. That my activities view, you see that task view, focus view, again, giving me one place so I'm not jumping through the system on all these records. It's a single place that I can work through my list of activities, and the relevant record is going to show up on the other side of the screen. So our last component before we get ready to wrap up is this idea of track. And I kind of talked about this because it kind of goes hand in hand with that execute bucket. But again, worst case scenario, we're doing this weekly, right? We hear this a lot. Oh, well, every Friday afternoon, the sales team kind of puts their heads down and reflects on what they did all week. I'm not sure what I had for breakfast, never mind a call I had 3 days ago. So I think it would, in my opinion and in our opinion, your worst case scenario is probably doing something like that, where you're trying to reflect on calls you had, looking at your calendar, being like, I'm pretty sure I talked to Joe. I don't remember what we talked about, right? Instead, if we can get into the cadence of doing it daily, or better yet, maybe even twice a day, or in best case scenario, real time, like I talked about, giving yourself 5 minutes at the close of every call just to jot down, even if it's short bullet point notes, to say, here's what I need to do. And really importantly, creating the follow-up, right? If you think of that cycle, that to us is probably the most important thing. What is the next action? I actually have a note on my computer right here that literally says next action. And it's my reminder on every interaction I have to ask the question, how do we move the needle from here to here? Right? How do we move the needle forward on what it is we're working on? Whether that's a sales interaction, a project, a piece of work that I'm trying to do, a blog I'm trying to write, a video I'm trying to shoot. What is it that I need to do next? And that to me, you get people into the habit of thinking of in that line of that train of thought, what is it that I need to do next? And having them actually translate that into a scheduled activity so that they know what they're going to do next. That's going to pay significant dividends in terms of productivity, because they're always going to be focused on moving the needle forward and doing the next best thing for that, whatever it is you're working on. Right, so as we see here, there's different options here. I want to zip forward a little bit, and this will be my last comment with respect to scheduling the activity as a follow-up. So Dynamics will do a little bit of that for you. Some of the basic functions or some of the premium functions will actually capture things automatically for you and say, hey, I heard this, right? I talked about it in the conversational intelligence example. I heard you say this. Would you like me to create you a task for that? Yes, please. I put it in my schedule. So I got it there and ready to go. The other thing is equipping your record with the ability to schedule follow-up. So you could do it manually, as you see here, right? Quick create form, create a task, fill in some basic information, and away you go. Or you could bake it into the form that you're working on. So I'm working on a phone call and there's a section called follow-up. Do I need a follow-up? Put that information. Or perhaps it's even going so far as having a Power App or a Power Automate flow that you're going to trigger. And while you're about to click that run flow button you see at the bottom, you fill in some information and you run the flow. And that flow, Power Automate flow, is going to go ahead and create the next activity and put it on your to-do list. So great functionality there. It's really quite straightforward to set up. It takes a few moving parts, but once you set it up, your users now have the ability, right from the record that they're interacting about, to say, what's my next action? I'm going to follow up in 2 weeks. Here's the content, couple of bullet points to give myself an agenda, and boom, I have what I need scheduled. So again, much like I did before, go over a couple of quick slides here. We've got ideas of creating follow-up automation. You've got the option of creating rules and business rules on your forms to show and hide certain information and take certain actions based on your selections. You then build some flow or classic workflow, even as you see here, or Power Automate flow that's going to go ahead and create an activity and populate it dynamically with the information you told it to. And as you do, you can actually populate some of that information as you go, right? So it's going to give you the basics and then you fill in the rest. Here, as our last point, is that you have the capability of doing some of this right from the Outlook plugin. Right? So if you're using Dynamics 365 sales or customer service and you install the Outlook app, you have the capability of creating activities and follow-ups and tracking information back to the Dynamics application, which is really quite handy, right? So again, it's equipping your users with the tools to be able to take this process, right? Schedule, prepare, execute, and then follow up and track that information. Giving them the tools they need to be able to do that in a proactive way is gonna give them the tools they need to effectively manage their workload day to day. Right? And that's a really important component. Really, at the end of the day, again, if you take anything away from this session, it's this idea of how do you get your users to be proactive instead of reactive. So as we move towards wrapping up, my parting comments here, there's a video that we're going to put here. You can look this up. It's a great video. It's perhaps a little cheesy in that it's clearly scripted, but the methodology or the thought process behind it is really important. And the concept is really about, how do you manage your time and how do you make sure that you're dealing with all the different things, right? Because we all have things pulling for our attention. We all have priorities that need our attention, but how do we make sure that we're dealing with all of them in the right capacity, right? If we fill our time dealing with all of the little, reactive things, then we're not being proactive, which means we have no room in the jar, to use the video's context. We have no room in the jar for all of the really big important things that we need to tackle, and we keep putting them off. And when we start doing that, I don't know about you, but I've been in that. We all been in that chair before, where we're firefighting day in, day out, and as a result, we don't have time to effectively plan, and that ultimately hurts us in the long run. So that said, the deck, again, if you would like it, you can reach out. You can watch the video from there. You can also look it up by the title you see on screen on YouTube. A great little video that kind of gives you some context into that. But Allison, I think now is probably time, because I'm down to the wire, if not over, to call it wrap up.
Malcolm, how dare you put words in my mouth that I would ever cut you off from another fantastic presentation. Thank you so much for that. So let me go ahead and take the reins for just a couple final slides. We would love to see you not only on future webinars, but get the chance to work with you. We specialize in Dynamics 365 and Microsoft 365, as I mentioned at the top of the webinar, and we work with clients for their digital customer workforce engagement strategies and are all about helping create contagiously engaged employees that transform the customer experience. So thank you, Malcolm. Thanks to everybody who joined today, and we will see and talk to all of you soon.